Hey everyone, well, welcome to our evening study together. Thank you for joining me. We're going to begin a new series of studies tonight on Sunday nights on the topic of how to study the Bible. I mentioned this morning in the sermon that it's not going to be an in depth kind of thing, it's not going to be me imposing my method of study on you. But really, what I envision in this is just offering some tools, offering some principles of Bible study that you could perhaps incorporate into your own Bible study method and routine, or maybe you find this way of studying the Bible to be helpful and you can kind of transition to using this way if you find that to be helpful. But I'm really excited about this study. I've never done a series like this before, and I'm excited to share with you some of the things I've really enjoyed and things that I've really learned over the past several years of this topic of how to study the Bible. And I'm excited to be able to share that with you tonight. We all study differently, we all have different methods, and it's just using um, the best method that we have that works for us. Um, I'm asking you also to make a commitment to these studies. There'll be some things I ask you to do. And I ask that because I know it's been helpful for me and I know it can be helpful for you. I want to make a point before we kind of get in to what we're going to talk about tonight. I want to make a point in noticing the difference between reading the Bible and then studying the Bible, because I think there are two distinct differences. When we read the Bible, what we're doing is we're just reading it for what it is. We're not really stopping to consider, um, places and people who are mentioned, or what does this word mean, or I wonder what that is referring to. We're just reading it for what it is. But then, in contrast to that, we have Bible study, where we're spending a more focused time thinking about some of those different things of, okay, who is this person, or where is that location, or what does that word mean, so on and so forth. So I do think it is important to notice the difference between reading and studying. And I wanted to kind of just bring that up before we got into this lesson. What we're going to do, this is part one of how to study the Bible. There'll be several parts over the next several weeks. I don't know how long it will go. I don't think it'll go that long, but we'll have several parts. And tonight, we're going to be looking at some preliminary things as we get started in the Bible study process. And so, just kind of some foundational preliminary things that help us as we prepare to study the Bible. So there are a couple of things that we need to do in preparation to study any book of the Bible. And the first one is going to be very, um, I don't know the best word. It's going to be self-explanatory. There's the word. The first thing we're going to do when we think about this subject of how to study the Bible, first and foremost, we need to choose a book of the Bible. I mean, again, that's self-explanatory, but it's important to note. Um, for our purposes, over the next several weeks, we're going to be looking at the book of First Peter. Here's why I chose First Peter. I know our congregation not long ago went through the book of First Peter, and so it's kind of fresh on your mind. But there's a second reason I chose it. It's only 5 chapters. And I think it's helpful, at least it's been helpful for me to start off with shorter books, 5 chapters, because it provides what I guess I could call a quick win. It is a reminder as we work through the text that you can do it. And so starting off with shorter books allows us to kind of remind ourselves and let ourselves know that we can study the Bible. And think about how difficult it would be to just start off with a book like Genesis or Exodus or Revelation. All those books are important. We need to study those books. But I think it's also important to start off with a shorter book that you can work your way through. And I think First Peter will do that for us quite well. So after we've chosen a book of the Bible, First Peter, we need to get a copy of the text. And that's kind of self-explanatory, right? Um, But here's what I want you to think about for a moment. We have our Bibles. We can use our Bibles. Yeah, you know, that's important. But I would suggest um, having a copy of the text that you can write on, that you can mark up, that you can highlight or circle or underline. That's really important. And the reality is, you may not want to do that to the Bible that you use bring to services on Sunday or Wednesday night. Or so finding a copy that you can feel free to write on or mark up or underline. Now, you can go to a online Bible website. There's a lot of them, and just print off a copy of the book of First Peter. I think I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to attach one to the link, or I'll send it to an email. But I can try to do that for you. But you could go online and print off a copy of First Peter. You could certainly use your own Bible if you feel comfortable in marking in your own Bible. Or what I am going to be using, although I don't use the ESV translation, the ESV has something really cool that I've really enjoyed. And I'm going to turn off my screen share for a moment so I can show this to you. Because I have found it really helpful. So here it is. It's called the ESV. I don't know if you can see that very well. The ESV Scripture Journal, and they make it for every New Testament book. This is the book of First Peter. I think it's First and Second Peter and Jude as well. But here's what I love about it, and what I'm going to be using over the next several weeks. But if you'll notice, you've got a copy of the text on the left side. And then on the other side, this part right here, it is a blank sheet of paper, or just a blank section with lines that go through it. And what I like about that is there's plenty of room on the text side to underline and circle things. And on the other side, you have plenty of room to make notes. And so I'm going to be using that. And I just share that with you in case you're interested in doing something like that, getting something like that. I think it was like $5 to buy this. And I think it's money well spent if it's something that you feel like you'll use. So whatever it may be, whether you print something off online, whether you use your own Bible, whether you use a ESV Scripture Journal, the point is just having a copy of the text you can feel free to mark up and write in and make notes in. And that's important because it's important for us to interact with the text. We are more likely to remember something that we have underlined or made a note about than just reading it for ourselves. And it allows us to interact with the text. It allows us to remember some more things. And if you have a copy of the text you can write in and mark up, you can feel free. You'll be able to make mistakes, I guess you could say. You don't have to worry about doing it in your Bible. We are disciples. We're learners. We have not perfected the art of Bible study. We are learning as we go. And so having a copy of the text you can mark up and write in allows you to make mistakes. It allows you to interact with the text, and it helps you to learn and grow, I think, in just being able to interact with the passage. So choose a book of the Bible, get a copy of the text. Thirdly, before I do anything else, I want to read through the book. Before I do anything else, it's so vital that we read through the book that we're studying. Why would that be important, do you think? Why is it important to read through the entirety of the book before going in and studying section by section? Well, reading through the book is going to help me better understand the overall message of what Peter was trying to get across to his audience and trying to get across to us. It allows me to see the big picture. It allows me to be better acquainted with the book itself. It's going to help me be able to remember things that I have I've read as I get into the nitty gritty of studying the text. And so First Peter is only 5 chapters. And so at least read through the book at least once. And if you can, read through it a couple of times. And as you're reading through the book, don't worry about marking anything or underlining anything or making any notes. Just read it for what it is so that you have a better understanding of what the message Peter is conveying to his audience and to us. So that's the third point. Read through the book. So, okay, what's next? I've got the book of the Bible that I'm going to study, First Peter. I got a copy of the text I can mark in and write in. I've got I've already read through the book at least once, if not 2 or 3 times. What's next? I need to gain perspective on the book. After reading through the book of First Peter, I need to have some clarity on a little bit more about some introductory matters to the book. And so there's some basic questions I think we can ask that help us better understand a little bit of the background behind the book, I guess you could say. And as we look at these questions, it's going to help us have a lens, a proper lens, through which we can read the book and better understand kind of what's going on here. So 6 questions that we want to ask before we begin our study. And the first one is I want to ask, well, who is the author? Who is writing the book? And before we go any further, I'm going to compile some notes on all of this. I want you to work through it first, but I'll have a document that I'll send out to you in an email that has some answers to these questions. But try to work through it first with the resources that you have. So that's the first part. Who is the author? Secondly, who is the audience? Who are the recipients? Who is, in this case, Peter writing to? Thirdly, when was the book written? That's important. So I can kind of have an idea of the context and when this might have been written, so that I can, think about what it would have been like to live in those times. Number 4, what is the genre or style of the book? We don't really use the word genre, but we get the idea. What kind of book is it? Is it law? Is it a prophetic book? Something like the prophets or Revelation? Is it narrative? Is it a story like the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Is it poetry, as we're going through the book of Psalms? Or is it a letter, which is this case? It is a letter. Peter writes a letter to these recipients. So what's the genre of the book? What's the main theme? As you read through the book, you can kind of get a sense of, okay, what's really the main theme of the book? What's Peter really trying to get across to his audience? And that's important to know. And then finally, how is the book structured? How does it broken down? Because that's helpful in knowing how to study section by section. And so those are the 6 questions to ask before we start any Bible study. Looking into the text itself, I need to know some of those background questions. And looking at those questions, it may seem overwhelming and difficult. I get that. But I think as you're reading through the book, you may be able to pick up on a lot of those questions. You'll, understand within the first couple of verses who the author and audience is. You'll understand what kind of style the book is, that it's a letter. You'll understand what the main theme is. Now, as far as, when the book was written or how it's structured, you may consult a Bible workbook that you have maybe on the book of First Peter that can help you in better understanding that. You may have a good commentary on the book of First Peter, or some kind of resource that you can consult that helps you answer those questions. And so I think, as I mentioned earlier, you all went through the book of First Peter, so you may have some of that in your mind. You may have a workbook you can consult to answer some of those questions. But the assignment I want you to work through this week, in between this Sunday and next Sunday, is answering these 6 questions. Read through the book. a couple of times, answer some of these questions. And again, I'll send a document your way that you can, at least if you're having trouble with some of that, you can at least look at what I put down. But I would really encourage you to try to work through it yourself, because doing it yourself is really the joy of personal discovery, right? So think about it this way. I think I may have used this analogy before, but imagine you're going into some gold mine somewhere, and you go in. How exciting would it be to go and dig for the gold yourself and find that piece of gold yourself? And maybe you've been digging for a really long time and you finally come across a piece of gold. How exciting would that be to say, man, I found this piece of gold? It would want you to do more, right? It would lead to, man, I want to keep digging. I want to see what I can find. That is the joy of personal discovery in Bible study. Now think about the opposite side of that. What if someone did all of the digging for you and they found that gold and they brought it to you? How exciting would that be? It wouldn't be super exciting, right? That you didn't do it yourself. And so that's the joy of personal discovery. Hopefully I kind of got that point across, but doing it yourself will lead to that joy of personal discovery. It'll cause you to want to keep digging more and more, is basically what I'm trying to say. So don't worry about doing it perfectly. We're not perfect at this. We're works in progress. We're learning as we go, but at least give it a shot. And I think you'll find it to be thrilling and exciting as you kind of work through these questions and as we work through these principles of Bible study that we'll talk about. So here's the point. Now that we have this lens, let me offer the assignment. Now that we have an understanding of, let me go back a couple of, so you can kind of just have these questions. Now that we have answered these questions, it provides a lens, as I was saying earlier, so that we can study the book from the proper perspective. And it's going to help as I answer those questions. It's going to help me take away from the text as I study it what Peter wants me to take away from the text, rather than reading it from my perspective. Does that make any sense at all? Understanding these questions is going to help me read the book from the proper perspective. Sometimes, at least I know for me, sometimes the temptation is to read into the text of what I'm going through, or from my perspective, rather than remembering Peter is writing to a specific audience. So every time we read and study the book, we want to ask that question. Well, what did this mean to Peter's original audience? What did Peter want his audience to know from that specific passage? Because remember, we're reading someone else's mail. And although we understand all of this is applicable to us, we need to remember that there was an original audience Peter wrote to. And so before I can begin to apply what Peter writes in this book to my life, I first need to ask the question, what did it mean to them? And although, again, our circumstances may be different, of course, there are still things we can apply to our life as we read and study this book. But I think that's really, really important. Be careful that we are not reading this from merely our perspective, but reading it from first their perspective and then applying it to our life. So as we kind of think about Peter's original audience, maybe some of the things we want to ask is this. What would it have been like for these Christians who are scattered throughout the region of Asia Minor because of persecution? What might they be feeling? What might they be thinking? What might their attitude be? As you read through the text and kind of do some thinking, you may ask the question, well, what would that persecution be like that they're facing They're going through suffering, as you'll pick up in the book. What would their attitude be towards God as they're going through these specific circumstances? What is it that they might need to hear in the circumstances that they face? I think all of those kinds of questions, as we ask those things, as we read through the text, it helps us better understand a little bit why Peter is writing, and it provides a lens through which we can study and read the book. So I hope that's helpful to you. What we've been talking about this evening is really just some preliminary things as we approach how to study the Bible. And I do hope some of those questions are helpful for you. That's the assignment. So work through those questions between now and next Sunday to gain a little bit of perspective on the book. So that's part 1 of how to study the Bible. Next Sunday at 5 p.m., we're going to come back with part 2. And we're going to look at the second part, and that is observation. What do we see in the text? We'll talk more about that next Sunday. But until next time, read through 1 Peter at least once, and then work through those 6 questions to gain perspective on the text. And as you do that, you'll be ready for next Sunday night. Let me leave you tonight with a word of encouragement. There's one thing I want you to remember as we begin this Bible study process. Be patient. I need that reminder over and over again. Be patient, both with yourself, understanding that this is going to be a process. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of energy. Be patient. You're going to want to be in a position that you're maybe not in just yet. And so embrace the process. Be patient throughout it. Know that you'll get to where you need to get to. This is a marathon and not a sprint. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with the process. Bible study is hard work. I don't know, but sometimes I think we approach Bible study and think, man, this is just going to fall into my lap. No, it's hard. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but it is worth it. Think back to when you were in school and studying some of those subjects that you have. Did it come naturally and easy for you? Probably not, right? It probably took a lot of study, a lot of hard work, and Bible study is the same way. And so be patient and know that as you work through it, it will provide fruitful dividends, not only now, but in the future as well. So that's how to study the Bible, part 1. I hope that's been helpful for you. I will be sending you, let's see, I said I would send a couple of things to you. I would send you a copy of the book of 1 Peter, where you can mark in it from an online Bible website. I will send you some answers that I have to the questions, those 6 questions we've talked about so far. Who is the author? Who is the audience? When was the book written? What's the style? What's the main theme? How is it structured? I'll send you a link, a document on my answers to those 6 questions if you have trouble working through that. But I hope this has been helpful for you so far. I really appreciate you studying with me and going through this process together. I really hope it's going to be helpful to you. And if you have any questions or you want to talk with me about it, feel free to do that. I'm an open book, and we can talk about it together and work through it together. So I will see you next Sunday night as we look at how to study the Bible, part 2. And that is how to observe the text. So thank you again. Have a good evening. Take care.